Today's question period started off with a much more empathetic and sensitive approach given what just happened today with the border crossing at the Niagara Bridge between the Rainbow Bridge between Canada and America. And we're going to start off with the beginning of that clip where actually Justin Trudeau excuses himself, which you haven't really seen him do many times. Usually he's stuck it out with question period and then he rushes off afterwards or in the middle. So it's actually very rare, but it was also the timing of it because it happened like 20 minutes or 15, but within 30 minutes of question period actually beginning. So it's somewhat understandable that he jumped up and responded in the way that he did, but it's also disappointing in the sense that we didn't get to see him get completely destroyed in question period by Pierre, which seems to be something that Justin Trudeau is always finding some sort of reason to skip out on, even though it pains me to actually admit that this time it made a little bit of sense. Welcome back to another video, everybody. Before we get into it, I want to encourage you to give a like and subscribe if you haven't yet already. Really helps grow the channel, as well as encourage you to turn post notifications on so it adds a layer of insurance to make sure that you actually get notified of upcoming videos, as well as remind you that there are some have you seen me stickers of Justin Trudeau on a milk carton still available for purchase down in the description or the pinned comment below. And without further ado, let's take a look at the back and forth highlights of today's question period. Lots of Pierre time and not lots of Trudeau time, minus the very beginning. And it seems to be like the main concern is the carbon tax and affordability here in Canada. Without further ado, here we go.
Questions.
Oral questions. Questions orales. Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
The Leader of the Opposition.
Here we go, folks.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Speaker, we've just heard reports in the media about a terrorist attack at the border at Niagara Falls.
What?
People may be dead, and a third is wounded. Can the Prime Minister give us any information about that terrorist attack?
Oh my God, even the FBI is involved.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, this is a very serious situation at the Niagara border. A vehicle blew up on the Rainbow Bridge. We're still talking to the authorities about it, and the Americans, our border service officers, the RCMP, and so on. I was contacted by the Minister of Public Safety. We're trying to gather all the information. We're providing support. We're talking to the Americans. I can confirm that the border has been closed down at the Queenstown, Peace, Rainbow, and another bridge. Additional security measures are being brought to all border crossings all across the country. It's a very serious situation, but we will remain engaged for the entire day.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, we've just heard media reports of a terrorist attack and explosion at the Niagara crossing of the Canada-U.S. border. At least two people are dead, one is injured. It is the principal responsibility of government to protect the people. Can the Prime Minister give us an update on what he knows and what action plan he will immediately implement to bring home security for our people?
The Right Honourable Prime
Holy
Minister.
crap.
Speaker, this is obviously a very serious situation in Niagara Falls. There was a vehicle explosion at the Rainbow Bridge crossing. I've been briefed by the NSIA and the Minister of Public Safety. CBSA, RCMP, and Transport Canada are all fully engaged in providing the necessary support. There are a lot of questions, and we are following up to try and get as many answers as rapidly as possible. We are in close contact with U.S. officials, and we'll continue to work closely with them. We will continue to be engaged. We will provide updates. Updates I can give right now is there are 4 border crossings that are right now closed: Rainbow Bridge, Whirlpool Bridge, Queenston Bridge, and Peace Bridge. Additional measures are being contemplated and activated at all border crossings across the country. We are taking this extraordinarily seriously, and Mr. Speaker, I will have to excuse myself now to go get further updates and work on this very serious situation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Wow.
The Honourable Chef de l'Opposition.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. After all experts warned
And just like that, Trudeau's
this
out.
government that its spending was causing inflation to rise, the government spent another $20 billion. That means tax increases, inflation up, interest rates up, rents
crap,
up,
man.
mortgage payments up. Will the government finally reverse its inflationary policies so that Canadians who have record mortgage payments to make so that they can save their houses, keep their houses? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, yesterday was a good day with good news for people wanting to buy a new home because there were measures in the fall economic statement that will provide for the construction of thousands of homes all across the country and more rental units through the purpose-built rental building program. And there's good news for households, for Canadians, and for everyone who's interested in having an affordable life here in Canada.
Leader of the Opposition.
What's up? Rent's up. Rates are up. Taxes up. Debt up. Time's up for this government, Mr. Speaker. After 8 years, they're not worth the cost. And now this Prime Minister takes on another $20 billion of inflationary spending and will bring up the interest payments on our debt to a record-smashing $51 billion a year. With 2 million Canadians eating at a food bank every month and many facing the loss of their home, why won't they cancel this inflationary scam and replace it with a plan to balance the budget and bring down interest rates and inflation?
What's up? That's a fun way to start it.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday's fall economic statement demonstrates the next phase in our plan to make sure that we have an economy that works for everyone. Mr. Speaker, the International Monetary Fund is predicting that Canada's growth will lead the G7 in 2024. We have the lowest debt-to-GDP ratio in the G7. And Mr. Speaker, while we are building housing, while we are moving on with our clean tax credits, while we are making sure that adoptive parents can have the benefits that they need, you know what's up, Mr. Speaker? The end of support for the Conservative Party for Ukrainians in this country and in Ukraine as the Conservatives vote against the Canada-Ukraine free trade deal. Shame on them.
Chef de l'opposition.
Actually, what's up is that the Prime Minister has once again betrayed Ukraine. He betrayed Ukraine when he gave Putin that big turbine to pump his gas and fund his war. He betrayed Ukraine when he refused to sell Canadian gas to break European dependence on Putin. He betrayed Ukraine by failing to vet someone celebrated in this House who turned out to be a Nazi. And he's betraying Ukraine with this terrible agreement to force a carbon tax on Ukrainians that will destroy their ability to fight a war and rebuild their economy. We will axe the tax and stand unequivocally with Ukrainians in their fight for freedom.
I'll ask the member from St. Albert, Edmonton, to please restrain himself. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if that were true, the members of the opposition would have voted in favor of the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement, an agreement that I will note the government of Ukraine asked Canada to do with them in a time of their utmost need when they're facing an illegal war of aggression from Russia. But instead of supporting Ukrainians in their time of need, instead of truly stand up for their fight for freedom, they vote against it on a red herring. Mr. Speaker, Canadians need to ask what the Conservatives are doing, and there's only one party that's betrayed Ukraine, and that's the Conservatives. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I want to express my deep concern about the incident that we're just learning about at the Rainbow Bridge crossing between Canada and the United States, I want to acknowledge the work of the first responders, and we want to express also our deep concern for those reports that indicate that those that may be injured and potentially fatalities as well. Our deep concern about that. We want to know what's the update in terms of Canada's assistance in the investigation, and the other steps to support those that have been impacted.
The Honourable House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to...
Somehow it's going to be grocery store CEO's fault, according to Jagmeet.
We are deeply concerned about what we have all learned recently happened at the Peace Bridge between Canada and the United States. As the Prime Minister mentioned, this happened very recently. He and the Minister of Public Safety are being updated as we speak. We will share information with the House and indeed with all Canadians as we get more information. But at this time, we do want to express our deep condolences to the people and the families who have lost loved ones, and we will continue to be engaged in this very serious and worrisome manner. Thank you.
Fear and falsehoods are the only thing they can use to distract from their disastrous record. Mr. Speaker, they are the ones clawing back from seniors and from families with their quadrupling of the carbon tax. For the first time in Canadian history, we have 7 million people who are skipping meals because they can't afford to eat, and 2 million people, a record-smashing number, are now eating at food banks. There is a common-sense solution, which is the Conservative Bill C-234, to take taxes off the farmers who feed us. Will the Prime Minister back down again, stop fighting this common sense bill, and stop taxing our farmers so that our people can afford to eat?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we are the government that decided that the retirement age should go back to 65, not 67, which was a decision that side of the House decided to make while their leader was in Davos, Switzerland. But let's stay in Europe for 1 second, Mr. Speaker, and talk about the appalling decision by these so-called conservatives to turn down a free trade agreement with a beacon of democracy like Ukraine. What is up with that party? That's what Canadians want to know. And this carbon tax excuse, no one's buying. What's up, Mr. Speaker?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the pathological obsession these Liberals have with carbon taxes has now reached a level where it is sick. This is how sick they are on the carbon
Absolutely
tax.
is sick.
That they would use Ukraine's vulnerability in the middle of the war to impose their destructive carbon tax on the people of Ukraine and make it harder for them to rebuild after the war. We already know this Prime Minister was used as a Russian propaganda tool when he brought a Nazi into the House of Commons. Why is he trying to damage the economy with a destructive carbon tax in this terrible deal?
I did not see that coming.
The Honourable Minister for International Trade.
The only ones who are not supporting Ukraine are the Conservatives. Let's be clear. The Canada-Ukraine free trade deal does not impose a price on pollution on Ukraine. And you know why? Because Ukraine already has a price on pollution.
Yeah, Ukraine does have a price on pollution in the middle of a war.
That already, right, James? Because the Conservatives are not.
Pretty wild. Oh my God, man.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, if it was already there, they wouldn't have needed to put it in the deal. We negotiated the free trade deal with Ukraine. We support free trade with Ukraine. We're the only party that supports a real trade agreement with Ukraine that would include supplying it with Canadian-made defense equipment, which they voted against yesterday. They voted against that yesterday. They voted against supplying Ukraine with clean Canadian energy that would repower their economy. So let's get this straight. They're against selling Canadian munitions to fight the Russian attackers, but they're in favor of imposing a carbon tax on Ukrainians. That's nuts, Mr. Speaker.
It's absurd, man.
The Honourable Minister for The Honourable Minister for International Development.
Mr. Speaker, it was bad enough that this party is the only party in this House that doesn't believe in climate change, that doesn't believe in fighting the good fight against climate change. But on top of that now, when Ukrainians are dying literally on behalf of freedom-loving people of the world, they're fighting fascism, they're fighting totalitarianism, they're fighting against an illegal invasion. At that critical moment, what did they choose to do? They chose to abandon Ukrainians in their hour of need. Mr. President, Canadians will remember this moment, and we will never forget this shameful party.
You can tell that the Liberals have to fake their enthusiasm.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, it really is a pathological obsession for a party not only to look at its starving people, the 2 million people in Canada that have to go to food banks every month, the 7 million people who are hungry in Canada, but then to say that the misery from their carbon tax is not enough here in Canada, that they need to export it by imposing it in a pre-existing trade agreement. Mr. Speaker, when I'm Prime Minister, we will have a real free trade agreement with Ukraine that helps them win and rebuild, but has no carbon tax. We will axe the tax here and make sure anyone in the world who wants to axe the tax has the freedom to do it.
Yeah. Make life more affordable.
The Honourable Minister. Colleagues. I know it is Wednesday. I know that we've all come from...
It's Wednesday, my dudes.
I need to ask members to please exercise self-restraint so that the Speaker can hear the question and hear the answers. The Honourable Minister for Justice and Attorney General for Canada.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday when the vote was happening on the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement, I was actually sitting with the Ambassador of Ukraine and Ukraine's Prosecutor General. We were talking about the pressing needs of the Ukrainian people and how we address those pressing needs and address their concerns in their hour of need. For the past 18 months, I was pleased to say that we had had a multi-partisan approach to addressing Ukraine. Unfortunately, that evaporated in a puff of smoke with a very decided and methodical vote taken on the behalf of the Conservatives. When we say on the side that we stand with Ukraine, we mean it. And when we say Slava Ukraini, we mean it even more.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Their program is hunger and homelessness for Canadians. Fortunately, we have a common sense Conservative solution which would take the carbon tax off of our farmers. The tax they want to quadruple. But the Prime Minister is in a panic because his Environment Minister says, and I quote, "As long as I am the Environment Minister, there will be no more exemptions to the carbon pricing," end quote. In other words, if this bill passes, his Minister of Environment will resign. Why won't the Prime Minister simply accept the Minister's resignation now and let this bill pass so Canadians can feed themselves?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Canadians know what it means when they hear the words common sense Conservatives. It means cuts to the programs and the services that they rely on that ultimately hurt Canadians. But let's put some facts on the table, Mr. Speaker. Since we've come into office in 2015, we've lifted 650,000 children, 2.7 million Canadians out of poverty. Canada now ranks 6th in terms of where we rank in terms of child poverty in the world. When the Conservatives were in office, when that leader was in office, Mr. Speaker, Canada ranked 24th in the world when it came to child poverty. Mr. Speaker, we continue to support Canadians. We'll stay on the facts, and we will not cut services like the Conservatives. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
No, what they're doing is cutting the food budgets of families by raising the tax on the farmers who feed us. Again, there is a common sense Conservative bill that passed through this House of Commons against the great protest of the Prime Minister, who still wants to quadruple the tax. We're simply asking him to tell his Environment Minister to resign and let his Liberal-appointed ministers pass the bill. So, what will he pick? Will he pick allowing Canadians to feed their families around the kitchen table, or will he keep his crazy environment minister around the cabinet table?
I don't think you're allowed to call them crazy. Yeah, here comes the House Speaker with the mute. Here comes the mute, and there's the mute button. That's where we're going to end today's video. I'd love to know what you guys think down below in the comments of any of the debating points. Do you like Pierre? Do you support Pierre? Or somehow have you found yourself watching these videos and you support Trudeau? Please let me know down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't yet already, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.